Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the May 9th meeting for Environmental Matters Committee. For the record, all the members are present, with Alderwoman Finlayson attending virtually. Welcome, Alderwoman. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So do I have a motion to approve the agenda as posted?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Let's see, approval of the minutes. Any motion to approve the minutes from March 13th? I'm sorry, March 14th?
Move approval of the minutes from the March 14th meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And we'll jump right into things. We put the legislation at the end so the committee members know. We put the R1924 at the end because the Director of Public Works, I think, wanted to speak to this, and he is not going to be able to get here until around 4 o'clock. So we are starting with the two IDs for general discussion. And first up is the Urban Forestry Program. Mr. Adam, if you'd be able to join us at the table.
I guess we could start.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Could you introduce yourself for the record?
My name is Brian Adams. I'm the urban forester here in the city.
And thank you for joining us. Just to also give some background for my colleagues. Since we are in the middle of budget season, we've been receiving a number of testimony that people have submitted regarding funding the tree program. And we have heard some other testimony from the departments about the current state of funding. And I know we've received in the past presentations from Mr. Adams as far as our tree canopy goal, and including with our comp plan discussion, there was talk about possibly moving our target for the tree canopy goal. And what I wanted to invite Mr. Adams here is to talk more about that. In particular, I have a couple of key questions, but I'll just let you give a presentation with that, because I think one of the key questions now is we need to look towards what your recommendations would be as far as the tree canopy goal and what resources we would need to get there. Because as I've said in previous meetings, that really hesitant to push back goals without sufficient justification or backing. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The presentation I have is really strictly about the proposed budget or what it would take to meet some of these goals. But just in general, the last time we surveyed and did an analysis, our canopy was around 42%. Our current goal is 50% land coverage by 2036, a date that is quickly approaching. We are currently, there was money in the budget last year for a new canopy study, and we're trying to obtain this software. Unfortunately, we've run into some issues with purchasing, and things have been delayed, but it looks like as of right now, we are going to get that before the fiscal year. So we are going to be able to see where we are, at least within the last 2 years. I think the data would be a year or two old. So that'll give us a good starting point as we look forward. I've laid out some different scenarios. We had discussed for the comp plan for 2040, changing the goal to 45%. And I understand you don't want to lower a goal. 50% it's a very high target, and it's an extremely, it's an extremely high target really for any municipality. 45 is generally considered really good. I think 50 would be excellent. So I understand not wanting to lower that goal, but I do think when you start looking at the acreage we have, the acreage we would need to cover, I I don't think the 2036 target is reachable. Just from, if you want to pull up the presentation, the first page does sort of summarize the acreage we're looking at. That'll give you an idea of
Mr. Adams, she could bring that up on the laptop. For you.
oh, I'm sorry.
So the current goal of 42%, and I see your
Current goal or current status?
current goal, current status is 40, correct, 42% tree canopy coverage by 2036. And you were saying that besides the resources needed to do that, there's also the scientific limitation of,
Right,
biological limitation of trees being able to grow.
At this
Fast
point,
enough.
even if we were able to plant thousands of trees to cover those acres, we don't have the time in tree years to give them time to grow and actually cover as much as they have the potential to cover from a canopy perspective. So, 30 years is sort of the guideline for when trees reach their mature canopy size or average to mature size, and they start to make a noticeable difference. So, if we were to plant trees tomorrow, that only gives us, 12 years. So I think rather than lowering the goal, I think what we should do is maintain our goal, but push the time frame out to give us time to build up the resources, and start working on that goal now with 26 years of time, for those trees to grow. I think it's still it's a high goal, it's a lofty goal, but I think it's attainable in that amount of time.
And thank you for joining us, Director.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I had to make a number of changes to get here because I wanted to participate in this discussion because it's very important to me. And as you noticed in the organizational chart that we presented with our budget, Brian and I will be working together closely, and I really have elevated his role within our department to focus on the greening of Annapolis, and this is all very important to me.
Thank you. And Mr. Adams, when I'm trying to remember the year we first adopted that,
So
the original goal.
Yeah, the goal was adopted in 2006. So it was 30 years. It was a study was done at that time. I think we were about 42% at that time, and this goal was set. And I've been here for 6 years, and from my start in the city, we've never really had the resources to put towards planting enough trees. We've done other things through code changes to try to eliminate loss. But in order to reach those goals, we have to increase the number of trees. So we just haven't had the funding or the resources to make that happen. In the last 2 years, we've started the Replant Annapolis program, which is a great way to get trees planted on private property. That's currently funded by the watershed restoration fee. And what I've also found is that the majority of our open space for planting is private property. So that adds another level of complexity to, how we increase our canopy. It's not just about planting on city or public property. It's about getting trees planted on private property as well.
Can we
Right.
dig into the slide a little more?
Yeah, can we get those?
Yeah.
All right, there's the slide. Can we make that full screen? Oh, that's fine.
So this is sort of an idea of a look at what we're dealing with. This is our total acreage. This is the amount of acres that canopy covers currently at 42%, and what the amount of acres we would need to cover for 50%.
Can I stop you right there? When you say total acreage, that's not total acreage for the city, is it?
That's what I was provided as the total acreage for our.
So not all of that is plantable,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So, and this, by way of background, it used to be years ago, we got our tree canopy coverage from a study done by University of Vermont, and then there was LiDAR or something.
Yep.
How are we getting our coverage measures now?
Great question. So yeah, the last analysis that was done, we did use LiDAR. One of the disadvantages to LiDAR is that it is very expensive to collect. And what we found is that was why we were limited with, see, we had the study done in 2020, but the analysis period was 2011 to 2017 because we have to use what the LiDAR data that's available. We can't afford to pay to fly LiDAR on our own, so we have to take what's available. The new program that I'm, working to acquire uses satellite imagery, but it also incorporates AI in determining tree canopy coverage, and it's being used by a number of municipalities, and they've been very happy with it. They have they have studies that show how much more accurate it is. It's on the level with LiDAR is what they're finding. There is some. It's not perfect, but it is quite close, and it's done at a fraction of the price.
So the 45, 48 acres, is even 50% of that plantable? When you count streets and buildings, I mean, we are a built environment. So how much would you speculate?
I would say it
those-
is if, when you include private property. If you're including all the private property.
You mean change the code so people can't cut down trees in their backyard?
There you go.
There's
Well,
a
you have to also look at, there are a lot of roadways and parking lots, but
Yep.
when you have a mature tree canopy, it overlaps. You could put one tree that completely overlaps the road as far as coverage, so.
Yeah, with a good, with streets that are lined with trees, you really get full coverage in eliminating that asphalt. So it's certainly possible.
Okay.
I think there are things we could look to do in parking lots where if we can ease the requirements, we could allow them to potentially take out a spot or two or however many to put trees.
They could put
Throughout the
rain guard
lots.
islands with trees in them.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
So these numbers are assuming an average of 45 trees per acre. I just use that to get these numbers for you. That's assuming a canopy of about 900 to 1,000 square feet at 30 years, which is it's an average canopy tree, like a maple. Sycamores would be higher. Certain oaks would be about there. So it's a guesstimate, really, but it is based on some actual numbers. So what that leaves is 364 acres that we would need to cover in canopy to meet that 50% goal.
Sign me up.
So that comes to, as you see below, about 16,380 trees at 30 years. So it's a lot. And realistically, if you spread that out over the 26 years, it still may be difficult to meet because we would need to be planting all the way up until that target's met. But I think it would at least put us on track to get there or have a plan to reach it, within a certain amount of time. But it would be doing a lot better than we're doing now. So this is the goal as it stands now. And you can see what the annual planting costs would be.
That's if we wanted to meet the current,
Yeah.
well, I mean, we can't biologically meet it, right?
No, we really
But
can't.
if we were to try,
And realistically, if you took the 30-year canopy average and you reduce that to 12 years, so you'd cut it in half, that would double these numbers. So it's not feasible. And the annual maintenance is just sort of a ideal number that I'd like to see for our tree maintenance right now. It's much lower than that, but we've requested more in this budget, so we're getting close to that number. And then the staff, I don't know how much staff costs the city in the end, but I just estimated it at $75,000 per position. And to plant that many trees, we'd need at least 2 more people.
that's before the proposed pay scale.
Yeah. So then
So what's in the budget now?
Well, so, yeah, so this, what he's going over, not in the, well, yeah, actually, that's a good question. So currently, what resources do we have in the budget for the
For
tree
this
program?
Coming year. I think we asked for about 200K for maintenance, I believe.
I think if I look at the,
Jody's right there.
well, and somebody provided answers in the spreadsheet. And this is the line item includes 182,000, which is 75,000 more than last fiscal year for citywide urban tree maintenance. And then there's more money in the special programs budget for tree planting, 30,000 for tree planting, that sounds right. So 30,000 for tree planting, and then tree maintenance. Can you describe a little bit what the tree maintenance?
Right, so the tree
includes?
maintenance costs would be primarily street tree maintenance. That's pruning, removal of dead trees, stump grinding when trees are removed, plant health care. So we have, certain trees that are high value that I treat on a regular basis, whether it's for insects or diseases. So those are the costs of essentially maintaining our street trees. So that would not include the replanting that gets done when a street tree is removed, when it dies. That's going to come out of a separate pot.
Okay. All right, so
So I didn't catch all those numbers. Do we have enough budgeted to meet these goals?
well, I think we need to move on to, because there's no physical way we can meet the 2036 target based simply on the, and that what got it for me, I was like, it's a great point. The trees just can't grow fast enough, regardless of if we threw all the money we had on it. So we really, I think, need to look at your next two slides as far as which target to go for. I mean, I'd be inclined just to go for the 2050. But I guess you can explain the difference between the 2040, pushing out to 2040 versus pushing out to 2050.
Yeah, the 2040, the only reason I included that is because that is the comp plan date. And so that was one discussion we had, was about, bumping it out. But really those 4 years, at the end of the day, they don't make much of a difference. I really think, after looking at all this, I think 2050 is the soonest, most realistic target that we could expect to meet. It gives us, 26 years from now, we're sort of laying out what it's going to take. I don't know that was ever done in the past. I certainly wasn't given any sort of strategic plan when I came to the city. So while I think this is it's not unattainable. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of work, but it's not unfeasible.
Well, so if for the new proposed goal, and I'd like to hear the committee's thoughts are, I'd be inclined just to go for the 2050, because I just think it's more feasible. Do you want to talk more about the 2040?
Look, I'm trying to not feel like a hypocrite. We're in the bowels of the comp plan, and we're espousing these kinds of goals. We recognize that trees help us address heat islands. We recognize that they are part of the amenities of making the city more livable. We really do have a lot of places, I think particularly on all of the public housing lots, that have virtually no trees, and so ample opportunities. And we're talking about what is chump change in the face of a $200 million budget. So I guess I'm much more inclined to want to keep higher standards and put a more realistic amount of money in here, both in terms of planting and maintaining, having the staff to do those things. And, we're talking, about the difference between 75,000 or I mean, we're really not talking about substantially different amounts of money, but this is, I just came from Columbia, Maryland, having lunch with high school friends yesterday, and they tout themselves as Tree City. Now, it's true, they were planned to be that, and they kept a lot of trees and so forth, but it is nice to be there. It is very lovely, it's comfortable, it is a nice goal to have. But particularly in a compact area like we are with so much impervious surface, if these trees in fact are hanging over our impervious surface and alongside of our buildings, this does not seem to me to be an outrageously expensive goal to shoot for. And so to intentionally undershoot just seems like we're missing an opportunity. But
Can I
I'm
respond?
only one member of the committee.
So that's 16 years from now, right? Math, right?
Yep, yep.
So is the 2040, I see we would have to be more aggressive with the number of trees per year. It'd be roughly 1,100 per year. I guess the first question is, that would give the trees, I guess it sounds like they'd start to be getting towards maturity in 25 years.
Here's the problem, and I'll just mention, we are Tree City USA as well, and have been for 30 years. 1,000, the inaccuracy of these numbers is that that's how many trees would need to be planted, ASAP, to give them the amount of time they would need to grow. So if you want to aim for 2040, you'd probably need to double the amount of trees per year, because that only gives them 16 years to provide canopy, whereas the other goal, we're looking at almost 30 years, which makes a huge difference. And you alluded to, the impervious and the compact nature of our city. We could throw a lot of money at this problem, but without the capacity and the resources to go out and execute, I don't see how we could do this the way we're staffed right now. And just, again, because most of it's private property, we really need to get buy-in from homeowners, from the community. I think we need to establish a nonprofit to help with tree planting. We have Replant Annapolis, which is working, and it's good, but they need to continue to build to be able to plant the number of trees that we would need.
So let me respond to a couple of those points. First of all, and I have to admit, we've been talking about it, but we can't let people cutting down specimen trees in their backyard. And we've lost a lot of tree canopy in backyards. And so I think we need to have code changes that stop that, or at least if it's coming down, there's a replacement policy just like we have in front yards. In terms of staffing, I agree we need more expertise, but I was wondering, we have a number of people in Parks and Recs, and a number of those people are to help maintaining trees on our park spaces and public spaces. Is there not some possibility of collaboration across departments, at least in the short run, but I think in the long run too? You're right, if you plant the tree and you don't maintain it, it's not going to thrive. It'll maybe even wither and die, but it isn't really helping us with our canopy. But it feels to me, particularly with the comp plan, this is exactly the right time to do the full court press to push these goals and provide the resources that make these goals attainable. If not now, we're going to wait another 40 years or 20 years for Comp Plan 2075. I mean, I want to be here then, but I'm not sure I will be. But in any event, it does seem to me this is exactly not the time to equivocate or fall back from standards. Now, Brian, if you were to say you're just throwing good money after bad, I would listen to you because this is your field. But I think we need to set a high standard and give the resources to make that high standard achievable. And so I would urge that we not fall back. And again, I would point out, in the scheme of things, we're talking about marginal amounts of money. This is, we're not asking
you're
for Fort
absolutely-
Knox here.
You're absolutely
And
right.
it is something that is amenity for all of us, every one of us who live here, every one of us who pass through our streets, park in our parking lots that are these heat islands, like the giant shopping center. And I think you're absolutely right. We need to set up foundations that help people, encourage people to do plantings. I'm actually having a mayor's daughter in to look at my yard to do plantings that are both indigenous species, but also lower maintenance, but more canopy. I'm not asking for help for me, but there are people who do need help. And there are parts of the city that, when I think about East Stort Terrace Harbor House and there are a few big trees there, but not much. And how much nicer we can make living there with expanding these efforts.
Yeah.
It just seems like this is the time to strike while the iron is hot, to coin a phrase.
I would argue that the 50% by 2050 is actually, it's a high goal, and that's a lot of trees to get planted. We did a community planting last year in Annapolis Gardens, which is a public housing community, and the grantee was so surprised at the level of outreach it took to convince people to let them plant trees. What we find in a lot of the public housing is that because they are not owners of the property, they don't quite see the value. And so it's a challenge. It's not as if we can go out and tell neighborhoods, hey, we're going to start planting trees tomorrow. You really need to get buy-in and agreement from the communities. We did a planting in Parole a few years ago where we offered free trees in the right of way. And I would say half of the homeowners turned us down.
Yeah.
We got some trees planted, but just to say that planting 650 trees a year, it'll take a lot, but I do think it's attainable. I just don't think that right now we have the capacity to plant over 1,000 trees per year.
Well, that's I guess it's an important thing to the Alderman's point. I think the comp plan and this as well. I think they are aspirational, not in the sense that they're not too far out there, but there's something we think we reasonably can get to, and we do think we do also at the same time want something that we can get inspired by. And I do see the colleague's point. 2040 is, it's not, it's fairly far away. 26 years, right? To double that, 16 years.
It's only 16 years. Yeah. Well,
Oh, yes.
looking at trees, it's not that much.
My new math. So 16 years. So I guess the first question, I don't know, maybe we cut it in the middle, but I guess the first question would be, can we really get enough trees to grow large enough? Because to your point, I think one of the things you're getting at is to meet the goal, you have to kind of plant more on the front end.
Yes.
So they get bigger.
Yep.
Because planting them at 2039, they're going to be small and not really do much
Correct.
to meet your goal, right? So most of the planting's got to get done in the first, in this case, if it's 16 years, it's got to get done in the next 10 years, really. So the question, if that is something we can, if that would give the trees enough, that's the first question, would it give the trees enough time to grow? The second part would be, if it does, let's not think about what you have now as far as resources, think about what we need to get there. So the first question regarding the trees, you think that would give them enough time if we planted, if we made a big push of the next 10 years, especially 5 years, 5 then 10?
I think it would need to be the next 5 years. I think 10 years would be the minimum for the canopies to be large enough to start showing up on, tree canopy analysis. Because when you first plant trees and their canopy is only a few square feet, they don't even register. So you would need to plant most of these in the first 6 years.
Okay. Is that factored into your numbers?
No, it's not. This is spread over the entire time.
So I guess if you could get some adjusted, because just to be frank, I'm planning on making these proposed amendment to the budget as far as getting the necessary resources to meet whatever goal we determine. And hopefully we can come to agreement as a committee and maybe introduce these as a committee if we think it's something we want to push for. So I guess that'd be the scenario to look at. Oh, Alderwoman, you have, sorry, you're a tiny little box on the screen. It's hard to see.
See my hand up. It's all good. I think we approved the original legislation since I've been on the council, since Alderman Arnett's been on the council. So it would have been a little later than 06. I believe, we came to know. But we haven't been able, it was a lofty goal to begin with. And we really have not had a strategy to obtain it. We talk about it, but we haven't put anything other than bringing Mr. Adams on board. We've done a few other tree experts had a citywide strategy. I'm afraid I'm still not hearing of one now. But we planted trees in the park at Annapolis Walk a few years ago. Big ceremonial event, and they are dead. So no one is able to maintain, and I suspect that was Rex and Park's responsibility. So how do we bring in Rex and Parks, and Alderman Arnett mentioned it, so that they know what to be doing to help maintain these trees that we have been planting. The other issue is all of the private property. How do we get to the residents to convince them to, one, allow us to plant on their property if we can afford it, or two, encourage them to plant on their property? And I think we could come up with some incentives to encourage both of those, but we have to do that. So I'm very realistic. If Mr. Adams says that the 2050 is the most reasonable and most attainable, then why wouldn't we follow his recommendation to us? It sounds like something that may be doable. Maybe we can plant 600 trees a year, but to set a goal of over 1,000 that we know we can't attain, I'm not sure, other than saying that we have that goal. So do we really want to try to put things in place to increase the canopy, to get it to at least close to where we want it to be? Or do we just want to say we have a canopy goal? So that's my concern. So I would go with his recommendation to go with the 2050. He's already told us that 2040 is not going to be attainable. I have a beautiful magnolia. It's going to be beautiful. That was planted in my front yard by my HOA when they took out a large maple tree. And it's still a little tree, but it has flowers on it already. But it's not contributing to the canopy. And it's probably been there for 5 years. So how realistic can we be? Or should we be? Or do we just want to say we have this goal, even though we know it's not attainable? So that's my 2 cents worth. And staffing. I don't know how we could have one person even staffing for the 600 plantings, even with Mr. Adams. That's just not attainable in my mind either.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Those are really good comments. I think you're spot on as far as do we want to simply say we have this aggressive tree canopy goal, and I really blame us, particular, myself as well, because, I thought, oh, we set this goal, rah, rah, it's great. We have a goal for 50% by 2036. But, because again, I was with the city back in 2007, I think it was. So, but, things I don't realize till now is like, well, what really matters is the implementation plan, right? It's the same thing with the comp plan, right? What matters is the implementation. And so that's why, I'm okay with moving the target as long as we have some plan committed to as far as resources. And as far as the target year, maybe we want to split the baby and say 2045 as a compromise on the committee. What I would suggest maybe is a request if you could get perhaps some other scenarios made up, which would be, and maybe focus on 2045, but or we could get multiple. But in any case, focus on working in some of those, the more aggressive tree planting up front, and presumably halfway to the tail end, you're going to end up having to have higher maintenance costs, right?
Yep.
Because you're going to have to be watering those, you're going to have to be taking down dead limbs and that kind of thing, which is going to, so overall, the money is probably going to be more or less the same annually. It's just going to go towards different purposes. To the Alderwoman's point about incentives, another thing to work in there would be potential financial incentives. We do it with when we have to get stormwater easements, any kind of easement, frankly, on people's properties. Sometimes we just have to end up paying them some money to get them to agree to that. And maybe we want to make some separate kind of agreement with, I know some people are hung up on the easement language as far as being unable to take down trees, but maybe there's something we could work in there that's a bit of a compromise to that, even to say, well, look, if we can perhaps give them approval to take it down, but only if it's replaced or mitigated or, and still under per review from the department, right? As far as being needed. But because I think the way some of the easements are worded now is there's really not any kind of wiggle room, right?
Right.
So for those incentive costs, I think that would be good to work in as well. So the other point to get to would be how to pay for all this. And that's also something which, if Public Works gets here, we'll have that conversation with them, but maybe we can start with Ms. Dickinson. But the Watershed Restoration Fund is the idea I had, because obviously trees are the one, besides the air benefit, the primary reason we want more trees, really, in my mind anyway, I know it differs per person, but are the water quality benefits. That's why in the water quality, the Chesapeake Bay model, forested areas have the highest value as far as water quality, and that's what the stormwater management laws seek to emulate. When they compared water quality drainage, they're always comparing to forests because that's the ideal. And I know separate trees are different from forests, but in the city, there's still benefit to having the trees. And we did update the language for the Watershed Restoration Fund a few years back to allow for funding alternatives to water quality instead of simply the stormwater projects. The county contributes funding, uses some of their funding from the watershed fund, their watershed fund on tree plantings. We do a little bit, but in any case, my idea would be to propose an increase on that to act as your locked in dedicated funding source. We know it's going to be there year after year, and work that into the whole fee structure. And so it'd be similar to any other fee where we do the annual report by Stantec, figures out what are our needs, how are we going to pay for it, what are the fee increases. Based on my calculations, it wouldn't be that relatively that much when you look at it, because it'd be our current fiscal year 23 budget for the stormwater fund is about, where are my numbers? 1.7, yeah, 1.79 million for stormwater funding a year that we raise. So if we need to, based on your numbers here, which I think are going to change, but if we needed to increase it by 600 and what'd you say, 652,000 a year to pay for, and I think frankly, we probably do need to add, well, I mean, that's going to be your call as well, but it does sound like we might need more staff as well. But just going off these 652,000 annual costs, if we do add that to the stormwater fee, that would be a 36.4% increase, which would work out to increase in the fee from, and this is based on FY23 numbers, from $24.44 quarterly to $33.35 quarterly, which is again, 36% increase. But what it works out to be is simply essentially $9 extra that people have to pay per quarter. So it's not a large amount. That's not a lot to ask, I think. And that's for the just typical residential user per quarter. Now, in the long term, I do want to restructure our fee. Again, I know this doesn't directly necessarily involve planning and zoning, but we can restructure the fee later on to make it more equitable, so it's not the typical residents who are paying the increase. It's going to be the larger lots, properties with impervious surface. But in any case, my point is, I think once we get the cost, I think that would be one idea as far as how to fund this without having to raise taxes. And I don't know what my colleagues think about that approach, though. Alderman Arnett?
So a couple of comments. I think that Alderwoman Finlayson is absolutely correct, and we need to thank Mr. Adams. This really is the closest we've come to having a clearly defined plan. I think the things that we're talking about now about coordinating to the extent that we can with our Parks and Recs people is something to pursue. It may not be feasible. They may not have the staff resources, but at least we can explore it. I do think creating a fund for incentives to get people to do their own planning, first of all, it's just education. Mm-hmm. What should you be planting? And then if you plant it, here's where you should plant it, and here's how you maintain it. But I will make one last pitch. The surest way to kill aspirational goals is to not fund them.
Yeah.
And really, this is the time to be talking both about aspirational goals vis-a-vis the comp plan, but also funding vis-a-vis the budget. So I will certainly support, I think it's a good idea. And not only that, getting this kind of analysis into this report we get each year for water, sewer, stormwater management is a good idea because it brings us back before us every year and gives us a strong focus. But also, I know there will be some people that will say $9 a quarter is a lot of money, $3 a month. But when the overall benefits of having the tree canopy and the amenities are brought to bear, it's just like paying for education.
Yeah.
You might not have kids in school, but you're still benefiting by the fact that young people are being educated. So it's a social good, social goal, and I think we need to fund it to achieve the aspiration as much as we can.
Just on the topic of funding, I did want to mention that, coming up, hopefully, we're going to have a large increase to our critical area fee in lieu as a result of City Dock. Most of that money, we have an MOU with critical area. There's a number of different types of projects that money can go to, but primarily it is to fund tree canopy. So that will cover a good portion of our city, which is a lot of critical area. We will have a funding source for tree planting in the critical area for some time. Not that all that money would be used for tree planting, but a good portion could be put towards tree planting if we can identify the space to plant the trees.
That's a good point. Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yeah, we're talking about increasing fees. Just got out of finance. We're already increasing fees in stormwater and all of our others. So I just want us to be considerate of what's already being proposed in the mayor's budget. Because this $9 or this $36 will be on top of what's in the current budget recommendations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so I think that's something, I think all three of the departments, finance, P&Z and Public Works, if you could work that into the documentation for this potential budget amendment, which would be what would the final, so it's once we work out the final costs of the program, assuming, we still don't know what year exactly, but I'd be inclined to just kind of, again, split it in the middle for now, 2045. And so if we can get those numbers figured out, we need to look at, take out the critical area funding as a part of that. Well, we should anticipate that because we know we're definitely going to get that. So that'll reduce this number a little bit. Work in some of the other costs that we mentioned. And then we need to go back to Public Works to figure out what the proposed, I think it's a 17% proposed increase in the stormwater fee for the next fiscal year. Sorry, what was that? 15?
Yeah, I'm
50.
looking at the increase now. It's
15 or okay. I thought you said 50. 15. Okay. So 15%. So I think what we'll need to know is what, once we add in your numbers, what's the total potential increase to see if, I know that maybe end up being a larger increase that could theoretically be, that could actually end up being a 50% increase. But that ends up raising the question again, once we really need, so we can do this a couple of different ways, and this is where I'm going to need finance's help. Given I'm being told that, and this is I'm glad the director's here from Public Works, I'm being told that we can't increase our we can't change our stormwater fee structure as far as following the ERU, the equivalent residential unit model, where it's really based on your actual square footage of impervious, that we don't yet have, I think I saw an email from Ms. McEwen, we don't yet have a handle on what we need to make that transition, but we think we can meet it for next fiscal year. Is that correct?
Hi, Burr Fogel, Public Works Director. Answer is correct.
Okay. And so if that's the case, what we have to work with is our current structure right now. So within that, we have, I think, two options. One, we just do an across the board, whatever works out to be 40% increase across the board. So every user is going to pay that 40% increase. Or we change it up. The second scenario, which I'd be more in favor of, more of a progressive structure where, because right now we have one, if I remember correctly, one tier for residential homeowners, right? So, and then we have 4 tiers for non-residential, commercial, non-residential properties. And that's based on their impervious surface. The more they have, the higher the tier. So the second approach would be we just increase it, or at least have most of the increase be for those larger tier users as opposed to just the residential users. Because frankly, I think the numbers I saw, it was like, it's somewhere around $2,000, for example, that our tier 4 users, I think, end up paying a year. So that'd be something like the Safeway, or I'll pick on my word, the Giant shopping center with all that impervious surface, zero stormwater management, and all they pay is $2,000, I guess it'd be a quarter. So $2,000 a quarter to mitigate. That's really, frankly, not that much, right? But if we increase that by X percent, that's going to be considerably more. But anyway, I think those are the two scenarios I kind of like to figure out.
Can I throw a third one out?
Yeah, yes, please.
To kind of build on Brian's comment about the city dock critical areas mitigation fee, that is a potential source to get the program up and running, or at least, for the things that that we would be eligible to spend that on.
Yeah.
That could really take a big bite out of that proposed rate increase and perhaps get us out of having to navigate maybe what might be some tricky legal waters in terms of why one tier gets a raised fee and another tier does not. So still,
I think
I think
that's-
there may be a way to do this, that's not quite so onerous. Still get the program started this year, and then we really fix things on the rate structure side in one clean move for the next fiscal year.
I think that's a great idea. And I think, yeah, like you mentioned, part of that's going to depend on what the allowable uses are. Sometimes those mitigation funds don't allow the money to be spent on staffing, but maybe in this situation, we could get special approval to do that? Because it is such a
I would think not. So I think staffing things and maintenance wouldn't be that way. But if it's about planting, sure.
Well, I think we should at least ask the question as far as of the whoever state agency, critical area commission, whoever it is that has the ruling on that. I think we could make a very strong case as far as maintenance being an essential part of making sure those plantings succeed, right?
Sure, but also keep this in mind that since stating the obvious, money is fungible, we can offset maybe some other expenses in the stormwater fund by some things that we might already be planning to spend SRF funds on. Use critical areas mitigation for those things. Free up the SRF dollars that we were going to spend on something. Use those to do the other thing rather than trying to go for some weird exception.
Yeah, that sounds good.
We'll say the critical area, it does cover maintenance.
Okay.
Yeah, so maintenance.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, just not stuff.
The other thing to throw out there for P&Z to consider would be looking at our other fees associated with trees, critical area, whatever, FCA. We can increase those fees because those fees are there to pay for, not just staff costs, but any kind of program costs. So if we raised, like, for example, the grading fees last year to help make sure they pay for all the staff that we have for stormwater. And I think we should do the same for, if there's room for fees, maybe we need to create new fees, but that's certainly another idea.
I will say that recently, I would like it within the department to start accepting more fee in lieu. There's sort of been this prerogative that we don't accept fee in lieu. We want all the mitigation on site, but what you find in practice is that these small residential lots get packed with all these trees
Right.
that eventually get taken out by the homeowners.
Yeah.
A few years down the road, where if we would have taken that fee in lieu, we could put it to planting, directly to planting. So it's something I'm considering, like to talk to Chris about.
That's a good point. All right. So we need to, I think, get moving a little bit. Anything else on this topic? Yes. Director.
All of these assumptions and regarding the number of trees required to meet the goal assume no net loss
Right.
in the existing canopy. And we know there will be net loss. There will be continued net loss. But we could set a no net loss standard in our zoning code so that it guides us in dealing with larger developments. So that's first of all. Second, the projections don't take account of the growth in tree canopy that results through redevelopment. So particularly as more urbanized landscape gets redeveloped, it becomes more treed. It's just natural because we apply our landscape ordinance, and that's usually the case, except for when a site that is forested is being redeveloped. But I think moving forward, most of our site development will be redevelopment and will actually involve planting new trees. So that comes at no cost to the city. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that there's a practical question here. It's not just monetary. Even if we had all the money in the world, it would be difficult to plant 650 trees per year without citizen engagement and real active participatory nonprofit type of engagement. And other jurisdictions in Maryland have encountered the same thing. Baltimore County now has an active citizen group that actually works with communities to identify sites and works with them, plants the trees, then ensures that people commit to maintaining them for a number of years until they're solid. to do that, we really need to collectively work to create that type of organization. And there are organizations that are aligned with that mission, but we just need to free up their capacity and their interest to do this. And so there's a community capacity building element of this that we'd have to engage in, because without that, we just don't have the public land to support the forests that these goals contemplate. Lastly, in many cases, it's more important about where the trees are planted than that the trees are planted. So there's an element of this that is requires some thought, and that's why Brian is going to be doing a greenways program, a plan, a real clear plan that will signify where the priorities are for planting. And you can imagine that there are places, there are environmental corridors that move their way through the city, and then there are gaps. Those gaps are important to fill, and environmentally, it might be more important to get some trees in there, or some grass, or some green or green roof, than to plant more trees somewhere else. Where the environmental benefit is just marginally insignificant. So that layer of planning is necessary. We're not there yet, and that's something that we really want to do. The other thing is we need really detailed, clear specifications on tree planting in the street right-of-ways. There are certain tree species that should be planted in street right-of-ways, and that should not be. There are certain amounts of soil volume that is critically important to supporting a tree long-term, so it can actually contribute to the canopy in 30 years. Without that quality of soil, and who's going to make that inspection to certify that that soil is adequate? Well, there needs to be someone in planning and zoning to go out and do that inspection, and we don't have that capacity yet either. But Brian and I are working on that very thing. So in order to get to those long-term goals, there's a lot of work that we have to do in the next several years that is not necessarily glamorous, and it's not about planting trees, but it's about building our capacity. And I just wanted to share that with you. There's work that has to go behind the scenes before we can get to those goals.
Yeah, and just on that, I do think we need to look through, you mentioned looking at prioritizing some of the greenway areas. I also think we need to look at this through an equity lens, as far as looking at parts of our community that have a dire shortage of tree canopy and need it. Because in my mind, that is an environmental justice issue because of the negative impacts we have when you don't have a tree canopy in a community. It's hotter, better air quality. So if we could identify those areas in the plan that you're looking to put together, that'd be good.
Yeah, I agree. I think the environmental justice piece is really important, and a lot of the funding available is for environmental justice action. So, we've got certain areas in our city that are, more subject to the heat island effect, have less stormwater control, and we would definitely want to prioritize those. And that a lot of times that's where there's open space as well. So.
Yeah. And the other thing, just for real quick, as far as the financing end of it, another approach would be, and this might be the wiser approach, is to phase in over time the creation of all the resources, allocation of all the resources, right? Creating the positions, the incentives, all that. We could spend the next year or two ramping that up, which makes the increase of the stormwater fee a bit more manageable. And we could figure out the costs a bit more. And once we restructure the fee, I think that'll give us a lot more wiggle room. So that gives us time to do that as well. So maybe we could look at things like that for this budget.
Yeah, I think, go ahead. Yeah, just as Chris alluded to, the capacity that that is needed, for us to take a big sum of money right now and say, go plant trees, it would be, it's just not feasible. We've got a lot of behind the scenes work to do to get to that point.
Yeah. Alderman Arnett?
So two quick things. Once, when we were discussing the Forest Conservation Act and the no net loss, we had a lot of the developers complaining they didn't have places to plant their trees. I guess we're not really doing a lot of new development right now, but they can be supplying some of the costs for these trees when there's new developments.
Well, the forest conservation laws at Maryland were changed a couple of years ago that discourage using fee in lieu programs locally and in favor of doing tree planting banks or forest banks. You probably know that. So that's a bit of a complicating factor to all this, but.
Right. The other point that I wanted to make is, Mr. Jakubiec, you mentioned no let loss standard in the code and a couple of other legislative things. We would be more than happy, I at least would be more than happy to work with you if you have some code changes idea to get them into legislation. I think that's the kind of partnership we need to have with the departments.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions on the forestry program from the committee?
Mr. Chair, are you not going to make an amendment to the 25 budget?
I am still going to be moving something. I think we need to get some more information before we firm up the exact proposal. I'd like to get some more information from staff, and then I can send it out to the committee so we know exactly what the numbers might be. I think we have a number of good ideas here, and we have to get some additional information on resources. Director Kubrick?
We understand that any additional changes or amendments to the budget would have required a filing by the 15th of this month. So so it's incumbent upon us to get this information to you soon so that you could reconvene if necessary. I don't know if you have to meet in public to make these determinations. If that's difficult, perhaps you could make a decision now and we will just implement your decision. Because the 15th is, I think, next week. Or
it is, yeah. Well, I mean, so as far as the decision, I would, based on what I'm hearing, I would propose moving forward with 2045 as a compromise between the two positions I'm hearing on the committee, if the members concur.
I'm good with that.
And then as far as the fee structure, again, I think we need to, I don't know if we'll be able to iron out right now as far as the costs, but that gives you a starting point. And again, I think it's important to phase in the resources so that it makes it, but once we get that number, then we can go to Public Works to figure out how much that's going to be as far as an increase to the watershed fund.
So just to be clear, the numbers you want, right, with sort of looking at more planting done in the next few years to make up the time, as Chris mentioned, we don't necessarily have the capacity right now to put all of that money into tree planting.
Yeah.
So I would ask for this budget now. Do you want sort of a more realistic number that we feel we can use to plant this year, and then we develop a...
We don't deal in realistic.
Well,
my point is, I don't want you to request $200,000 and we can't spend it because we don't have the staff or the nonprofits or the space. You know what I mean? So.
Very good point. Director Dickinson?
Sorry. Finance Director Dickinson. If you're talking about that plan to use, and I assume we're talking about the City Dock project paying critical area fees, those fees would go to the critical area fund in the reforestation fund, not in the watershed fund. Yeah. And that's where we would spend those monies from to do the planting from there. So if you're going to take that avenue that was suggested, that's where we would add that to the budget, not to the watershed fund, and it wouldn't affect the fees for this year. So that's one avenue. You would have to do an amendment, propose an amendment to the reforestation fund. Increase their revenue, anticipated revenue coming in, and increase their budgetary authority for spending.
Well, for the critical area portion, but as far as the non-critical area, because we don't have, the only funding mechanism with the reforestation fund is the fee in lieu for critical area, and I think FCA goes in there too. Forest Conservation Act properties. So beyond that, there is no fee structure. The appropriate fee structure for most of the daily activity, it's going to have to be, my point is going to have to be split, I think, between the two funds. Some of the costs are going to have to come from watershed fund, which
it depends on how much you want to do and where. And I don't know if there's any allowances for the critical area fee to be used outside the critical area.
No, it's going to have to be split.
Absolutely not.
No.
It has to be used in the critical area.
It doesn't have to be in the buffer, but it has to be within the 1,000-foot critical area.
And that's fine. It's all part of the same program, but the program, I don't see how we can get away from having multiple funds associated with that. I don't know how to do it budgetary wise, but the only way we can have an actual utility fee is through the stormwater fee.
And then my concerns would go to having these challenges and however you're trying to implement your fee increase, if those would undergo some challenges, as was discussed.
Well,
So
now, maybe, I guess,
it would take a while to, if we had challenges, it would take a while to address those challenges, and we might end up in the next fiscal year anyways, which is when you're trying to go to the other fee structure.
yeah. Well, I guess the one question would be if we do raise money through the watershed fund, through the stormwater fee that's been authorized by the state, can we send that money to a related but different fund? Can we put that into the reforestation fund, or does that have to stay within the watershed fund?
I don't know. I'd have to look at how the reforestation fund was set up. There is a portion of the reforestation fund that can be used just in the regular, not inside the critical area. There's another pot of funds there for the fee in lieu of. If it wasn't set up with any restrictions, you could move it over there and spend it out of there. I think you could do it either there or the watershed fund.
Okay. All right, I think we have, staff have enough information to develop a amendment proposal for us?
I'm still not completely clear. Do you want, for these costs that you want me to update, do you want me to include the entire city, or am I cutting out the critical area because that's a different source of funding?
No, I think the overall budget, my thinking would be overall budget is going to be all the costs related to the forest program, but down below that's going to get broken out as far as whatever it is, 20% of the planting fund is going to, total funds are going to come from, 20% are going to come from critical area, 80% are going to come from watershed fund, right? We'd have to see that split out, at least as far as conceptually. Same thing with maintenance costs. That's going to be split between, it's difficult because it's the same program, but it's multiple funds just because of how the states set these up. I don't know how we get around that in the short term, but does that make sense? I know it makes more work on your end as far as splitting out the proportions, but we kind of do that already with the stormwater fund. There are some positions that are funded, whatever it is, 40% come from the watershed fund, and other funding comes from other, the sewer fee, or I think we have to do the same thing with the forestry program.
And the committee is advising us to propose a staff person in this first year or two, beginning in the next fiscal year, to handle this work.
I'd say at least one, but it's going to come down. But if you think that would be helpful in the first year.
Yes, and it would be helpful. But as a matter of, I don't know that we can literally accommodate more than one person.
Just physical
right now,
space?
literally space constraints and, but certainly Brian would need assistance right away because his time is simply tapped out. But we have a couple planner positions that we're filling, which will relieve Brian some of other responsibilities that he's taken on. But the capacity billing part of this, it takes a lot of effort to plant a tree.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think that was the case, but beyond the actual labor of buying and installing and planting and maintaining a tree.
Yeah. Does that help provide clarity?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I had envisioned basically a tree planting coordinator type of position that would devote their time to organizing these projects and executing.
Yeah.
Do you need to?
And
You need to.
it may be worth, and this is more a question for something you may want to consider as far as structuring your personnel, if it makes more sense, how it makes sense to do that if you have multiple, like the county has like engineer 1, 2, 3, engineer, senior engineer, engineer manager. Obviously, we're probably not get that big with the program, but there may be personnel-wise different approaches to that.
Okay.
But all right, so if we have some clarity on that, do we have any questions on the stormwater utility before we move on to legislation? On the Stantec report from the stormwater fee, any questions? Do you want from the committee? Because Director Burr, you're here. Vogel, I keep saying Director Burr. Sorry. Are you here primarily to talk about the resolution regarding Spa Road? Exclusively, okay. Well, let me just double check. Are there questions on the fee from the committee for the director, the stormwater fee, before we move on?
I do have a question, and I am looking at the Finance Committee report, which you guys don't have the benefit of having yet because you'll get it on Monday. But it lists all of the increases in the enterprise funds on water and sewer.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't want Mr. Jakubiec to slip away.
Me or and so I just want you to be aware, and you probably saw it in the presentation, I guess in one of the work sessions. Sewer rates are going up 3%, water rates 4.75, watershed 15%, solid waste 10%, residential quarterly billing for 10,000 gallons 7%. So just wanted to put that out there. Those are coming as the recommendation from Stantec.
Yeah, we do need to keep that in mind. Thank you. Okay, and I would like to, I think did you have questions for the director?
Did, but it's for this next topic.
Okay.
I've been given the understanding that we have a letter from Melissa Evans, Maddox Evans, that is very explicit about what is needed in the council resolution to support the CNI program. And it's much more explicit than the resolution we have before us in at least the following ways. One, it needs to recognize that there is remediation required at Spa Road and to recognize that the city will be responsible for that remediation. Do you have that letter, and is that something that can be shared with us, the council?
Wait, but before you answer that,
Yeah.
I think we're finished. Mr. Dickinson, I know you said you had a meeting. I don't think we have anything else for you today. And Mr. Adams, I think we're done with. Thank you.
I have seen that letter, but I have not been involved in drafting that resolution or the vetting of that resolution that went through the city administration. So I'm not going to comment on that. I don't know how those differences were resolved or discussed.
All right.
I could certainly look into that, Alderman Arnett, if you need a response, and check in with the folks who were involved.
So for the matter of the record, we've moved on to R1924, which has been referred to this committee for discussion.
Yeah, Vicki Buckland, Assistant City Manager. So I did reach out to Eric Lashinsky, and I believe there's an email that Ms. Maddox Evans sent, and Eric just responded to as well and CC'd me on, where she said she was not familiar with a letter like that, and Eric isn't either.
If I could, from my recollection, it was in an email, I believe, that she had sent out to a number of people. That's where I recall, because as soon as you said that, it triggered a memory of reading something to that effect. And I believe it was an email that was sent 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. It's been quite a while. That's what I remember.
Well, let's back up a little bit for the public.
I just didn't want to lose the opportunity to ask the director. I think I will want that letter to be able to figure out how to deal with the resolution.
So for the record, this is, again, R1924, which deals with the Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative Transformation Plan. This resolution would, at the end, state that the city council resolves that we will adopt the Eastport Choice Neighborhood Initiative Transformation Plan and approve the use of the former Public Works property to meet the goals of the plan. And so to that, I know reason why it's coming to this committee is because of the contamination that's on that property. It used to be, part of it used to be incinerator and landfill, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so we wanted to, for me, I know personally, I have a lot of hesitation and concern as far as putting any kind of housing near contaminated land. So I just want to make sure we get our heads around what's going on there before we give approval. And maybe we want to add things, speaking to the committee, add something to this resolution that speaks to some of that, because I think we really need to get an idea of where the contamination is, what we're doing to study it, and I think that's what you're going to be
Right.
talking about.
That's really here what I'm. That's what I'm here to talk about.
Okay. You want to? I'll give you the floor if you want to.
Sure. Okay.
start.
So again, I'm Burr Vogel, the Director of Public Works. The slides that I'm presenting today are taken from a presentation that our environmental consultant, Haley Aldrich, gave to the Maryland Department of the Environment on this Monday, May the 6th. I was there, Betsy McCown was there, as well as an environmental project manager that we have working for us. So I've taken the slides that we presented to MDE and reordered them a little bit. They're all still here, but I wanted to get to the most important things up front. That presentation was fairly technical in nature and directed towards a regulator with the specific intent of advising them what we will be doing as we submit an application for what's called the VCP program, Voluntary Cleanup Program, and our Phase 2 work plan that would come along with that application. So, starting with the timeline here, because this lets, I think, gives everybody the context. And this was the very last thing we presented to MDE, but it talks about submitting this work plan here in June. MDE gets 45 days to review that and comment, and then we would start that work, and the on-site soil sampling would be fairly quick. And that would tee us up for developing corrective action plans, looking for grant funding, and so having a remedial action plan in winter 2024. And those remediation actions could be taken up front, could be done some in advance of redevelopment, but many of the likely proposed remediations would be done while we were developing, because they kind of relate to how you construct your buildings.
I'm not sure I understand what that means exactly.
We'll get to it. About how the mitigations that as you build things. So there are things like vapor barriers. So you wouldn't allow, let's say you had some soil vapors that you were concerned about making their way up into people's basements or first floors. If you put a barrier while you're digging the foundation, then that cannot happen. So there are things like that.
So
All of which would have to be approved by MDE before construction can start.
So I feel like we're in a catch-22 here, because at least I don't know where we're thinking of the CNI housing going or where the contaminated areas are. I assume they're close. We also...
I would ask you to just hold that thought. We will cover that.
So, I mean, this is what makes it hard for me to understand how we can prove a resolution, as much as we may want to support, and I do, the CNI program, when we don't know what the level of remediation is and the kinds of protections, or where the housing will be placed. Are there not places in the Spa Road facility that do not need remediation? Or does it all need to be remediated? I don't have a good map.
I think you'll understand the situation better coming out of these slides.
Okay,
But
I'll wait.
but to one of your concerns is we don't know exactly what we'll have to do until we completely characterize the site. That is a very true statement. But what that really means is what are the cost implications? Because sites that are far more contaminated than this can be used for residential. You just spend the money and you clean it up, or you build in the mitigations. So what's really at question is just the price tag. I also want to make the point that we can be very, very confident that we're going into this. VCP is the most strict regulatory framework you can go into. The residential cleanup standards are the most strict standards within VCP, and I think you can have high confidence in MDE's ability to make sure we don't expose people to things we should not. So the regulatory framework will provide, to the questions of risk and safety and things like that. I've got a lot of confidence in MDE is going to kind of put us through the ringer on this, as they should.
Yeah, but to Alderman's point, that's still unknown.
The cost is unknown, but so are some of the construction costs, right?
costs
The
are
numbers that I hear about for the overall choice neighborhood, it's hundreds of millions of investment that is required. This will be only a very, very small portion of that.
Well, the costs are unknown, final MD approval is unknown, and the exact remediation measures are unknown. I know
Right,
there's
and in a year, we'll have resolved almost all of those unknowns from the environmental side. In the meantime, a lot of work to be done in selecting a development partner, finding other sources of funding, starting design work, any preliminary design work. So I think we can go on parallel tracks. That's just my opinion.
But there's one more thing that's not known yet, at least not to me, because I was operating under the assumption that we'd follow the state land use code in terms of surplusing land. But now I'm hearing we're not going to give the land to the CNI program. We're going to lease the land to the CNI program, which seems to me that it, in effect, makes us a landlord that is subject to the very inspection requirements that are causing HACA so many problems right now. But it is very hard to commit to a resolution that is 2 sentences long, very nebulous, and has great potential cost implications for the city, but more importantly, potential risk applications for anybody who would live there. And so that's what I'm hoping we can see in your slides as we stop.
Sure, and I'm only here to talk about that risk side of things.
Right.
I really don't know much about housing. It's
All right,
not my world.
Before we go back to Alderwoman Finlayson's been patiently waiting.
Yes, my question, I hope it's a simple one. I saw Williams Whalen Field listed on your slide. I can't see it right now because it's not up. So the CNI project is merging. What's the connection between the redevelopment of the fields, other than the fact that this is all our property?
Okay, go ahead.
Is the Williams Whalen Field being consumed as part of the CNI project?
It is not, but I'm talking about the cleanup application with the Maryland Department of the Environment. So they need, the very next thing that we need to do is site characterization. Another word for it is called closing data gaps. There are things we don't exactly understand the depths and the extents of certain areas of contamination. So we need to eliminate all of those critical unknowns, and then following that, develop work plans for remedial actions. And so when you see on this slide, I think it's 3 up from the bottom, it says interim corrective action plan for Williams Whalen Field winter 2024. What we're shooting for there is MDE to approve the corrective actions that we plan to take that would allow us to put the field back into service.
Okay.
But it's all we're going after one global site characterization that gets us to two goals. Kind of the short-term goal, open Williams Wayland Field. The longer-term goal, be prepared for a housing redevelopment.
I guess I thought MDE had been in and had explained to us what remediation needed. I'm hearing, what I think I'm hearing is that really that was never completed.
Not quite all the way across the finish line, correct.
Okay. All right. I understand. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, next couple of slides are really just maps. I think we all know the site, but zooming way out. We've got 19 acres out there split among 3 parcels. The parcel on the west side is the Public Works Maintenance Facility, our salt dome, largely unused at this point, except for some storage.
That's the old salt dome, right? You have a new.
Yes, we have a new one at 39 Hudson. On the east portion, we have the Williams Wayland Field, our current in-use fuel pumps, and parking for vehicles and storage for public works utilities.
Will the fuel pumps go away?
I think they would have to, right? So I
They
think,
will also need remediation then, right?
correct. Which a lot of that will get taken. We have another CIP that removes the underground storage tanks, which is a regulatory requirement that those be taken out and replaced with an above ground storage tank. In conjunction with that, if there's any soil that needs to be removed, contaminated soil in that area, we'll do that with that capital improvements project. Quite a number of previous investigations on this site going back 20, 30 years, if I'm not mistaken. I'll just focus there on the text in red, where 2 arsenic hotspots and chromium were detected that exceed the permissible standards there at the Williams Wayland Field.
So that's only the field where the chromium is elevated to the maximum concentration, and then the other chemicals listed don't exceed the residential standards. So the one of concern is mostly the chromium.
Arsenic as well. It's one of those funny regulatory things. It exists in nature at higher concentrations than this, but we still can't have the field open. That's just kind of how it is.
And then the next one says, I don't know, I don't remember my periodic table, but all
same.
the chemicals exceed residential cleanup standards on the subject property. Is that on the field, or where on the property are those?
I think in various locations, but we have very few soil samples outside the field.
Okay.
If I jump forward a little bit, this was really the worst of it. We have a hot spot there where
The red area.
those red boxes, the C2 on the left side, and then all of those red boxes going up towards the Bates Field.
So could you
And
flip
let me
back?
see if I've got a bunch of, so you can see here, those are proposed. I'm just gonna jump. This one gives you an idea of how little sampling we did outside of the field.
Right.
Just one in the bottom right, one in the left next to Spa Road.
And they're none across.
And then we did a lot more on the field subsequently. So
And there's nothing done across the street on the west?
no, nothing across the streets. And so this is all of the proposed sampling we is going to be in our work plan for this phase 2. Right, so we're really going after some of those areas where we didn't quite do much in the past because we were very focused on Williams Wayland.
So so the phase 2 will be taking the more detailed, actually.
Right, that's really the kind of, in my layman's understanding, is phase 1 is more of a talk to people who work there, try to understand the history and the uses of the site, and then a phase 2 is actually taking soil, vapor, and water samples.
Yeah, you don't always do a phase 2, but only if phase 1 finds something.
The phase 1 found stuff, right? And so we're going all over the place here, but I'm on what is labeled as slide 8. Yep. And these were the recognized environmental conditions. So the phase 1 produced these recs, and they said you should do investigations because you have these known environmental risks.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go back to slide 6? Here's the confusion I'm suffering from. The maximum number of units that can be put on the current footprint for Eastport Terrace Harbor House is 622. What HUD would like is something in the mid 700 range. So say 130 more units than we can get into the current footprint. And this is all to get the mixed income and so forth. I'm trying to figure out here where those 130 units or so forth might go. But it seems like
here.
mostly where we've not tested.
Exactly. That is really a big focus of probably the primary focus of this phase 2. Understand what's going on where those buildings. I mean, that whole area is going to be classified as residential, and so we'll have to if there's any contamination at the surface, take care of that, and then make sure vapors don't get into people's homes.
Now, it looks like there's things on the other side of Spa Road. I know at one time, the mayor's notion was that would be apartment space for artists and have retail on the first floor. Is that other side of Spa Road where the Salt Dome is now, the thinking that that's also going to be part of the CNI program?
This is what we took out of the current CNI drawings, yes.
So, to Alderman Savage's, is there the need for any testing there?
There is, and that's in the phase 2 work plan.
It's in the phase.
It is in the phase 2 work plan.
So we're going to have to do this testing no matter what, if we want to sell, surplus, or lease this property. We're going to have to test and figure out what remediation we, the city, are going to do. We're not going to be able to put remediation off on any other entity, right?
I think we could dispose of the property without doing this. It would then those risks carry over to that buyer.
Would want to do that, yeah. Yeah. Well, and this may not be.
They're responsible for doing their own due diligence, and then under CERCLA, we're still the responsible party. So, there would be some shared cost exposure there, I think. Not being an environmental lawyer, but I think that's how it works.
Yeah.
So that's somewhat disabusing me. My notion was that we, the city, created this problem years ago. None of us were not guilty, but we did it. So we were ultimately going to be on the hook to finance the cleanup. If we don't sell the property or transfer it anyway, we just leave it fallow, maybe no remediation is required, but it would seem to me that any other kind of transaction, giving it away, selling it, leasing it, we're hanging out there pretty liable if something bad happens.
Yes, that's correct. That's how CERCLA works.
Right.
Is that the polluter and a lot of other parties that may have touched a property along the line are on the hook for the remediation.
Well, I think once somebody buys it, they assume all the risk.
They assume some, I think.
Think Love Canal.
But it doesn't get us completely out of it either.
No.
Okay.
Just if we were to sell it.
Well, so that's a lot of stuff. I think it's important to get.
Can we get these slides, please? I guess we have them now. Yeah.
So it's important, I think, to get the phase 2 results. But I guess, and I suspect this may be more of a question for the city manager, but is there any urgency behind, like, what's driving this? Can we just simply wait to pass this resolution until we know the phase 2? Because it's a lot of unknowns I'm personally uncomfortable with until we know what's going on.
So my understanding from HACA is they need something by next summer to show that they're still eligible to continue with the CNI program. And again, this is only an understanding because I haven't seen the letter from them. I've only heard about it. But it would seem to me like this committee and/or rules might want to hear directly from HACA what it is they need in order to keep the CNI program moving, or at least their perception of it, or from Mr. Lashinsky, who seems to be the staff person that is largely responsible for shepherding this.
So-
I think Mr. Vogel has given us, thank you, a lot of information. I want to read it over, but I think you've made a pretty clear picture. We have a lot more work to do to know what we have, and then from there, we'll need to be putting out bids for remediation if in fact we're going to remediate
So-
the property.
So my understanding regarding the timeline is, and the value of the resolution is that it serves a couple of different purposes, and reassures a couple of different parties of the city's intentions and commitment to a longer term engagement on this project. Some of that is for HUD, just kind of demonstrating, yes, we are in fact an active partner. HACA is obviously the main applicant to HUD, but the city plays an active role. But the other thing, and the sort of shorter timeline thing, is that HACA will be soliciting for a developer to be a partner in this. And so part of what they, I think, want to be able to do is to, again, demonstrate to a potential partner the city's in the mix. The city has a commitment to be in the mix. And it, I think, helps to limit the potential hedging that a developer may want in order to be involved and to help reassure developers and help get a wider mix of developers who might be interested in participating or responding to that solicitation.
Well, and maybe that's a couple things on that. Maybe we can work, if that's the case, maybe we can work something into the resolution that factors in a lot of this contingent on the contaminated, the phase 2 findings. But also, we also need to factor in, again, I think, staffing, and maybe this is more appropriate for rules and government, but we heard today from Planning and Zoning running out of space. Public Works has a new building at least, but
But they don't have enough space either.
it may not have enough space in Gorman. But I know we've heard from Finance Department, they don't have enough, they're running out of space. I know the City Manager's Office, I've heard that from before as well. So I think I'm really hesitant to give all of this property, commit all the property to be used for housing, when perhaps it would make sense to at least keep the west part potentially for expanded city offices. but then we don't have to rent Gorman as much. But, in any case, I think it might be prudent to talk a bit about that, and maybe that's something we want to work into the resolution as well.
I think it ought to be in the staff report, and I find all of the things that I've heard through the grapevine, who knows the accuracy of it, but I think we need to know more about what the CNI program thinks it needs in explicit commitments from the city.
Yeah.
We need to know timelines. I don't think there's anyone on the council that is not fully supportive of the CNI program, but we are also stewards of the city and the city's finances. I don't think there's any mention of money. Is there in the CIP for remediation? Are there dollar amounts for doing this? And I can't believe we would be committing to remediation without knowing what it's going to cost us.
Right, not for the full site. There's enough money to do what we need to do for Weems Whalen, or very close to.
Right, so
And so that other bill, unknown how large, but if you remember back on the first slide, there are grants available, not available directly to the city to use, but if we had a development partner, the grants could go to them. You kind of set up a third party organization. The grants go to them. They conduct the cleanup.
Well, and back to the Alderman's point as far as driver, that is something I think we need from the city manager's office as far as what exactly is driving the density. I know that we have a requirement, a hard requirement, I think, of replacing what gets renovated, right, removed in the main part of at Eastport Terrace.
it's there,
But
357.
the 357 units, but the other additional units on Spa Road, based on when I was looking at the grant, that was always an optional, that was an added extra that was potential, and that's how it was stated in the grant because there are a lot of unknowns with it. But we were told by staff that, no, we were required to put in the additional 300 some units of mixed income houses, but when I was asking about that, it doesn't sound like it's an actual requirement. It sounds like it's just you get extra points for it in your grant application. It's a higher score, but that's not a requirement. There's a difference between a requirement and something that helps you get your grant. That's the kind of information we need to know is what hard facts are driving this as far as hard requirements are driving this versus, this is just going to increase our chances. This is exactly a part of the process. This is going to help us get approval with, because if it's just a matter of,
But we've been down this road before. When we were going to do Newtown 20, we were going to build 20 extra units, and those were going to be for market rate people, or another dream was they could actually be for purchase by the residents. And when we got to actually doing it, there wasn't enough money. I think that the mixed income is more than just extra jimmies. That mixed income, what I've gleaned from the CNI meetings is what makes this kind of redevelopment successful. You're not just putting things back in kind, that you really do need that mixed income, and you need the room for that. I still haven't seen how housing is going to be allocated across the two different parcels. I would hope that there will be Section 8 and market rate and the housing authority, affordable housing people in both places. But I'm willing to say that's a refinement that we're working on planning that out and refining it. But I actually think that having this extra space is pretty critical to the success of the program, allowing this additional kind of mix of incomes, workforce housing and market rate people. But I'm having a hard time, and I see the number here, 97 units on that one picture that you showed us. In talking with the mayor on the other side where the Salt Dome is, he had this vision of an artist colony essentially that would have a couple of floors, the first floors of the buildings being retail, which could be, helping with providing food for the CNI program too, as well as the people living there, and then artist space, say on a second floor, and then floors above in high-rise buildings, which kind of a cool idea, I think, but I'm not sure we're there. But for this, for me, I cannot sanction signing off on a resolution, a two-sentence resolution that is totally vague and does not talk about the responsibilities that the city is assuming by making this land available to anybody until we know what we need to remediate, how we're going to remediate it, and what the costs are going to be. Quite frankly, if the rest of it pans out the way Weems Whalen, doesn't sound to me like we're that terrible a shape. Maybe a layer of clay and an impervious surface. If we have to dig down 10 feet of soil and replace it and cap it and so forth, and then make it stable for construction, that is a lot more money.
Yeah.
Right, I do want to make the point there of what that remediation is likely to look like, and that is where you have to excavate for utilities or building foundations, you have to dispose of that material in a safe way. So that's going to be a big chunk of the cost, is what I would expect, is what do you do with any contaminated soils that you have to excavate out. And so that's where I think we'd be looking for that brownfield grant funding to help the project out with that.
Yeah.
So we get to
Otherwise, you're doing some of these kinds of things. I'd be quite surprised if we had to do sub-slab depressurization. I don't think we've got a lot of oils off-gassing or anything like that, but it's possible.
I want to check in with Alderwoman Finlayson because I can't see her anymore. Is she still with us? Does she have a question?
I can see you.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Sorry.
I am, I think, where you guys are as far as not having enough information. And my thought is that maybe we have another meeting where we invite Ms. Maddox Evans in and Ms. Lashinsky. I don't like the hearsay. If there's a letter, I want to know why it didn't go to the mayor or the city manager or us. We just don't know. So, I think we should have another meeting and we put everybody in the room to get the answers. I don't want to kill the legislation before I even know what I'm killing. So that would be my proposal. I mean, we can speculate all day, but
Yeah. I will second that. So, Ms. Jackson, could you send an invitation to, I guess, those three, but to Ms. Maddox Evans, Plan and Zoning, Public Works, and City Manager's Office, and we'll get everybody together at the next meeting.
Can I put
work
one
this
other
out.
thing there, which is there a plan B? Like I was talking with Alderwoman O'Neill about the WNAV site or some other site that that city has that would accommodate 97 units or whatever, that doesn't need mitigation. And I don't know the answer to that. I was asked that from one of the people that was talking about this from the another venue. Do we have any other option than this? And I don't know, or it might not be as good an option as this, but it does seem to me that number one goal of the resolution, which I accept, is to move the CNI program forward with assurances that the city is a full partner and a responsible partner and a partner that's picking up the bill for any remediation. But if there's another way that we can do this, Alderwoman O'Neill said, does it even have to be in the city? we do own considerable properties outside of the city. I think that would be a logistical problem in merging the communities, but I don't think we've been given the full picture here, the full understanding, as Alderwoman Finlayson just said. And I would say we're going to be in the same fix when Rules Committee takes this up as well. So, and maybe we ought to do a joint meeting in terms of expediting this process and have all of the appropriate staff here together with Rules and Environment. You and I are Rules, we'll just bring Brooks in and we'll have a full complement of council members. But it seems to me like we have a lot of information we need to get and to be comfortable with. And Mr. Vogel, you really have given us a meaty presentation. I do appreciate that, although, as usual, it raises as many questions as it answers. But
And we never
do have a
let
point.
them finish it, but.
No, I think I actually got through everything. We bounced around a bit, but I certainly covered everything that I wanted to.
Okay, good. And so I'd also like, oh yes, Alderwoman?
Could we get a copy of his presentation?
Yes, Ms. Jackson will send that out.
Okay.
And also, you should have a link to the full Phase 1 report.
Yes, thank you. Great.
May I also
Yes,
that we have a joint meeting? I think our next Rules Committee will come before your next Environmental Matters meeting. So why wouldn't we make the next Rules Committee a joint meeting and invite everybody in for that meeting?
sounds good to me. The other request I'd have from the city manager's office would be, could you look at the staffing component? As far as we're increasing in size. We've heard a lot of requests from the departments. Do we have a clear need to expand our space for city employees? And if do we have options downtown? Or do we need to actually make sure a part of this, instead of being an artist colony, maybe we need to make it into a city employee colony? But because I think this is the time we need to get that information. And I'm happy to defer to Rules and Government. It's not necessarily environmental, but
So with
related.
respect to staff space, part of what's in the FY25 proposed budget is money, and we actually just completed a contract with a real estate services company to look for space for staff. There is the space study we shared that was done. We shared with council. But that is looking at existing buildings. And Burr, if you want to jump in. I mean,
The space study, I think, identified about a 10,000 square foot shortfall from where we should be with our staffing plans and what we have today. So what we're kind of going to be exploring with our real estate partners, McKinsey, is what are the options to find, ideally a single space that we could accommodate all of the functions or most of the functions that are across the street, what's at Gorman, and all be in one place. And ideally, we would find something that we could purchase, because in the long term, that's the financially sound thing to do. But that's going to be a unicorn, right? It's close to downtown, 30,000 square feet, affordable, all of that. We're probably going to need to make some compromises on one or more of those factors. But that's what we're going to be exploring is a mix of lease, own. What can we find that really sets us up in both, kind of solve some of our short-term, maybe critical needs, but also takes care of us in the long term and really maybe puts us on a better financial footing eventually, right? So that, 20 or 30 years from now, people aren't looking back and saying, hey, why are we still leasing that building at this rather high cost when we could have bought it 3 times over by now?
Well, and that's my point with this. We currently own this property, and if we at least take the western half and put a new building there for city employees, we can put all that money towards the new building instead of having to purchase the property and then build. Cost effect wise, it seems like it would be, again, wise to kind of take that into consideration in the evaluation. Because, I mean, we're not going to make money off, most likely, the housing project, because we're talking about leasing that to the housing authority for it's going to be like our usual leases. There's just $1 a year. We're providing that service of housing, but in the end, we could potentially be spending more taxpayer money because then we have to buy another property.
We will. There is that other downside of where even on the east side, the functions that we still have there for public works laydown, which is extraordinarily limited at Hudson Street, and fuel tanks, we're going to need to find a new home for those functions, but potentially in the deal, right? If it's a public-private partnership, maybe that lease does incorporate terms that for functions that need to be replaced elsewhere, are taken care of by that developer. But certainly a good point.
Okay, I think
We've drifted off topic a little bit about space
and
management.
I need to get going the town hall tonight, which I'm not ready for. All right, anything else from the committee?
No, this was good.
Thank you so much, Director Vogel. Got it that time. All right, anything else for the good of the order? Oh, actually, do we need to make a motion to postpone action or just say no action? All right, we'll take no action if that's anybody have an objection. Oh, okay, so we do need a motion to postpone.
I move we postpone to a joint meeting with Rules and City Government.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries. Anything else for the good of the order? All right, any motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Have a good evening, everybody.
Ew.